welcome to Tennessee's At Home Learning Series for Literacy. Today's lesson is for all fourth graders out there, although all children are welcome to tune in. This lesson is the second in our series. My name is Valencia Smith, and I'm a fourth grade teacher at Venus Stewart Elementary in Gallatin, Tennessee. I'm so excited to be your teacher for this lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. If you didn't see our previous lessons, you can find them at www.tn.gov/education. You can still tune in today's lesson if you haven't seen our others, but it might be more fun if you first go back and watch our other lessons, since we'll be talking about things we've learned previously. Today, we'll be continuing to read the poem, The Echo in Green, written by William Blake, and we'll continue with the poem for the rest of the sets of this lesson. Before we get started, to participate fully in this lesson, you will need 2 pieces of paper, a pencil, a surface to write on, and the student pack for ELA Grade 4 Lesson 12, which can be found at www.tn.gov/education. If you joined us for Lesson 1 in this series, we talked about how the poem The Echo in Green was set after the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War was between the American colonists and Great Britain. The colonists eventually won the war and became free from Great Britain. The poem that we are using was set for this set of lessons is set post-Revolutionary War in 1789, 6 years post or after the war. In Lesson 1, I introduced you to the author William Blake. He did not live in America. Instead, he lived in England, the country that the American colonists were fighting against. Remember, if you enjoy the poem, you can find his poems on the internet or in your local library. This is the second of 5 lessons focused on William Blake's poem. By focusing on the poem for several lessons, we will have time to think deeply about the poem. Yesterday, we considered the characters and the setting of the poem. I hope you finished your summaries from yesterday. To help you remember what we discussed, here's what I wrote. As I read, think about how yours is similar or different than what I wrote. The Echo in Green is a poem written in 1789 by William Blake. In stanza 1, 2 characters are introduced, the rising sun and singing birds. The setting takes place in a large field in the morning. Stanza 2 opens with old John sitting under an oak tree and ends with children playing. The setting does not change in stanza 2. Finally, in stanza 3, mothers are holding babies and brothers and sisters are gathering around their mothers. Stanza 3 is still set in the large field, but the time of day has changed to evening. The 3 stanzas in The Echo in Green by William Blake are set in a field. But the time of day changes from morning to evening, and many characters are performing actions throughout the stanzas. Did you have a chance to make an illustration of the poem? I can visualize a green field where children are playing from morning to evening while the older folk watch. Because we dug into the characters and setting in Lesson 11, we will now focus on the structural elements that Blake used to create the poem. The elements we will learn about today are stanzas, repetition, rhythm, and similes. Structure is the way something is organized. So we will be thinking about how William Blake used stanzas, repetition, rhythm, and similes to organize the poem. As we talk about the words through the lesson, I will explain them further. But there will be time for you to practice thinking about the meaning of the poem by engaging in writing on your own with my support. Finally, I will assign you independent work that you can complete after the video ends. This is the same structure we followed in the first 2 sets of lessons. During our reading today, we will capture details about the structural elements. Go ahead and write The Echo in Green by William Blake at the top of 1 piece of paper. I also want you to copy this chart. We will use this as we read the poem. If you have a copy of the poem, you can use it as we read together. If not, follow along with me on the charts I have created. Just like I said during lesson 1, each day we will read the poem all the way through at the beginning of the lesson. You will be surprised about how much you will learn about the poem in each lesson and how what we learn together will change the way you understand the poem. Today, as we read through the poem, I want you to continue visualizing or seeing the poem in your head using the characters, their actions, and the setting to develop the picture. Again, our time together today will be spent making sense of the structural elements. I bet you remember quite a bit of the poem from lesson 1. The Echoing Green by William Blake. The sun does arise and make happy the skies. The merry bells ring to welcome the spring. The skylark and thrush, the birds of the bush, sing louder around to the bell's cheerful sound, while our sports shall be seen on the echoing green. Old John with white hair does laugh away care, sitting under the oak among the old folk. They laugh at our play, and soon they will say, such were the joys when we all, girls and boys, in our youth time were seen on the echoing green. To the little ones weary, no one can be merry. The sun does descend, and our sports have an end. Round the laps of their mothers, many sisters and brothers, like birds in their nests, are ready for rest, and sport no more seen on the darkening green. Ready to analyze the structural elements? All right, let's go. Yesterday, we started a conversation about stanzas, which are divisions in poetry like paragraphs in essays. Do you remember how many stanzas were in the poem? Yes, you are correct. There are 3 stanzas. Now, you listen as I reread stanza 1. I want you to think about what is being described. The sun does arise and make happy the skies. The merry bells ring to welcome the spring. The skylark and thrush, the birds of the bush, sing louder around to the bell's cheerful sound, while our sports shall be seen on the echoing green. What is described in stanza 1? Very good. Stanza 1 is describing the morning on the green. I'm going to add today's notes in green, and I'm going to write morning on the green beside stanza 1. Let's do the same thing for stanza 2. I will read it, and you think about what is happening in stanza 2. Old John with white hair does laugh away care, sitting under the oak among the old folk. They laugh at our play, and soon they all say, such were the joys, when we all, girls and boys, in our youth time were seen on the echoing green. What is being described in stanza 2? Good job. Stanza 2 is about old John laughing and remembering being young. I will add that to my chart on the side. We're going to add old John laughing and remembering being young. Finally, let's do the same thing for stanza 3. I'll read it, and you think about what's happening. To the little ones weary, no one can be merry. The sun does descend, and our sports have an end. Round the laps of their mothers, many sisters and brothers, like birds in their nests, are ready for rest, and sport no more seen on the darkening green. What did you hear happening in stanza 3? I heard the weary kids coming in from the green at the end of the day. Let's add that to our stanza. We're going to write weary kids coming in at the end of the day. Now, let's move to the chart we created at the beginning of the lesson. What did you notice about the stanzas? Take a moment and jot down your notes. I was thinking the stanzas represent a full day, starting with the morning, going through the midday, and ending with the evening. So let's write that on our structural chart. Stanzas represent a full day, morning, midday, and evening. Now, think about how Blake used these stanzas. Good. Blake used the stanzas to separate the 3 parts of the day. So let's add that to our chart. We're writing use stanzas to separate the 3 parts of the day. Now, what changes in each stanza of the poem other than the time of day? I noticed the green changes over the day. During the first 2 stanzas, there's laughing and playing, and it is bright. The author uses words like merry bells and talks about the birds singing. But in the last stanza, it gets quieter and darker. The author used words like weary and darkening green. So for stanza 1, let's add bright and cheery for 1 and 2. And then for 3, we're going to add quieter and darker. So go back to our stanzas chart. We're going to write bright and cheery. That's stanza 1. That's stanza 2. And then for stanza 3, we're going to write quieter and darker. Now, we're going to consider how William Blake used repetition in his poem. Going back to our structural chart, repetition is the repeating of words and phrases. Let's think about how Blake used repetition. We have read the poem several times now. Can you think of anywhere you heard repeating words or phrases? From my memory, I can remember hearing the title or parts of the title, The Echoing Green, repeated. Green is repeated at the end of each stanza. In stanza 1 and 2, on the echoing green is used at the end of the stanza. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to underline that in green on our chart. We're underlining on the echoing green here. and on the echoing green here. Why is it an echoing green? What does the word echoing tell you? In stanzas 1 and 2, there are lots of noises. So I think he used the word echoing because the noises are bouncing off of each other. The birds are singing and the children playing. The whole green or field is echoing. But in stanza 3, how is the green described? That's right. It is called the darkening green to show the time of day is changing. Think about when you have been playing outside during the day. The color green is bright when the sun is out, but when the sun starts to set, the same grass starts to look darker. That is why Blake called this the darkening green. So let's underline this. The darkening green. Now, let's think about why did the author use the repetition to describe the green? Very good. I think he used the repetition to show the changes in the green over the course of the day. So we're going to write in the repetition, echoing green, or for stanzas 1 and 2, echoing green. And in stanza 3, darkening green. And we said that the author used that to show the changes of the green over the course of the day. So let's write that on our chart for how did Blake use this element. Shows changes in the green over the course of the day. Now, from our poems of reading of poems, I remember another repetition in the first and last stanza. Do you remember anything else? Very good. I remember the sun was mentioned in the first and last stanza. So let's go to the first stanza and our last stanza and find the word sun, and we're going to underline it green. And also add it on our structural chart. Add the word sun. Now, in the first stanza, Blake's words were, the sun does arise. And in the last stanza, his words were, the sun does descend. What do you think? Why do you think Blake mentioned the sun twice? Very good. I think he chose to repeat the sun so he could show how the sun was changing from the beginning to the end, arising or going up in the morning, and then descending or going down in the evening. Let's add that to our chart to show the sun changes. Good. I bet you already guessed what we're going to look at now. Rhythm. Rhythm is a regular repeated pattern of sounds. Rhythm has a lot to do with the number of syllables in the line of a poem. I'm going to play stanza 1 so you can see it. Look at the first line. How many syllables does it have? Let's read it. The sun does arise. Very good. It has 5 syllables. Now, you try it. The next line. How many syllables does it have? And make happy the skies has 6 syllables. We don't have time today, but if you were to count the syllables in the lines of the stanzas 1 and 2, you would find that most have 5 syllables, with a few having 6 syllables. I noticed that the last stanza, I counted these syllables too. Most of them have 6 or 7 syllables, with a few having 5 syllables. I want you to read through stanza 3. Notice how you read it. How do the syllables change the rhythm throughout the poem? When I read it out loud, I noticed the syllables of the words caused me to read stanza 1 and 2 faster than stanza 3. So let's add that to our chart. Stanza 1 and 2 faster, stanza 3 slower. How does that make you feel as you read the poem? Did you notice a difference? When I read stanzas 1 and 2, I felt more upbeat and happy because the sentences have less syllables. But when I read stanza 3, it caused me to slow down and read more calmly because there are more syllables. I think Blake used the rhythm of the syllables to cause us to read the stanzas differently and feel differently as we read. So let's add that to our chart. Read and feel different when reading the stanzas. Very good. And finally, similes. Similes are figures of speech in which things different in kind or quality are compared by the use of the words like or as. Blake does this in stanza 3. Look at stanza 3. Do you see like or as anywhere? Very good. Like birds in their nest. What is Blake comparing to the birds in the nest? Very good. He is comparing how the children gather around their mothers. I'm going to underline this in green and draw an arrow to the previous 2 lines so we will remember what is being compared. Let's add this to our chart also. We noticed that the birds in a nest were compared to the children around their mothers. So on our chart for similes, we're going to write birds in nests were compared to the children around their mothers. Now, why would Blake use this simile? Jot down some notes on your chart. I think he used the simile to help us visualize in our heads. I know how birds are squeezed together in a nest, which helped me imagine the children grouped tightly around their mothers when they return home from the green. So why did he use that? Very good, to give us more description. Let's add that to our chart. used to give more description. Again, I am so overwhelmed with how much information we have gained by looking at the structural elements of the echoing green today. We have thought deeply about how William Blake used the structural elements of stanzas, repetition, rhythm, and similes. Now, I want us to prepare to write about the structural elements. If you remember, I said we were going to write about the structural elements of the poem from our notes. Notice that our chart sets up our paragraph rather nicely. We have each structural element, which we notice, and how Blake used it. We can work our way through the chart to create our paragraph. As always, we need to start with an opening sentence. Look at the chart and think, how might we open our paragraph if we were going to discuss the structural elements? Jot down your thoughts at the bottom of the chart. Here's what I thought. William Blake used stanzas, repetition, rhythm, and similes to provide structure to his poem, The Echoing Green. Now, we need to look at our information about the stanzas from our chart. Say out loud how you might summarize what we wrote about the stanzas. I wrote 2 sentences. One structural element William Blake used was 3 stanzas. He used the stanzas to show how morning turned to evening. We will now write about repetition. How might you transition into repetition? Try to write it on your paper. I wrote, Blake incorporated 2 main repetitions in the poem, the sun and the green. Guess what? You get to write now. You will finish writing about the repetitions of the sun and green, and then write about rhythm and similes, using your chart as you go. Here's your task for today. Write a paragraph about how William Blake used the structural elements of stanza, repetition, rhythm, and similes in his poem, The Echoing Green. Be sure to use specific examples from the poem, include an introduction and conclusion to your paragraph, and consider how you will link your thoughts together. When you have finished, get creative. Draw a picture of the children around their mothers like birds in a nest. Boys and girls, once again, I have enjoyed reading The Echoing Green with you today. Thank you for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson in Tennessee's At Home Learning Series. Bye-bye.